The Florida Gators should look into the transfer portal to improve their defensive line for the 2025 season.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Monday. I am Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI. And you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And the Florida Gators, yes, defensive line this year really stepped up and really made some great plays. But here's the thing. You're losing a few players. You've lost two starters so far with Cam Jackson, who is out of eligibility, is playing in the bowl game, is going to play in the Senior Bowl, and then going to the NFL. And Jack Pyburn, who entered the transfer portal, said, hey, maybe I'll return. And Billy said a whole bunch of nice things. And then Pyburn started tweeting pictures or posting pictures on Instagram, talking about the narrative around it. And that kind of seems like, okay, he ain't coming back, right? You've still got the status of Tyreek Sapp up in the air. He can return. He can declare. He can portal if he'd like to. The only starter is coming back is Caleb Banks, who tremendous pass rusher, one of your better defensive players overall in 2024, if not your best defensive player overall. That leads me to say the Florida Gators should be using the transfer portal to beef up their defensive line. You have a 2-year championship window. Go get the best players you can. Lee Hunter, 6'4", 320-pound defensive lineman from UCF. He's one of those players that you should go get. I genuinely think that he's one of those, figure it out later players is what I like to call them, where I say, hey, you just go get the best players you can, accumulate talent, stack talent, and figure it out later, right? Like Lee Hunter, he's 6'4", 320 pounds. He can play. Okay. I don't think Lee Hunter should play nose tackle really often. Like, that's not a thing he should be doing at the SEC. However, I do think that you can say, hey, we want to get both Caleb Banks and Lee Hunter on the field at the same time. So we're going to put Caleb Banks at nose tackle, where he's rotated in previously. We've seen him perform there. We can put Caleb Banks at nose tackle, Lee Hunter at Caleb Banks' spot, and play with that. Or you can say, hey, you guys are going to alternate every few plays. We're going to have that rotation going in. Jamari Lyons is going to be at nose tackle maybe, right? I think Lee Hunter is one of those guys where you add him to your roster and you just figure out the rest later. You just accumulate talent. This is a talent acquisition business. And you can go back, like I've been a big fan of Lee Hunter. You can go back to when Florida played against UCF this year. And when Florida played against UCF this year, like the preview, I was talking about how Lee Hunter's a guy that I thought could cause a lot of havoc. Okay? I was like, hey, that Lee Hunter, really good football player. Like he's the guy that you have to worry about when you're watching UCF or when you're playing UCF. You have to go, all right, where's Lee Hunter? That's who we need to neutralize. Like that has to be our focus as an offensive line. Lee Hunter's the guy we have to look at. Lee Hunter, 28 pressures in 2024. And also, by the way, like I said, go back to the Florida preview with when it was Florida UCF week. Lee Hunter's the guy I talked about. Go back and watch the game. He had a pretty damn good game. UCF's defense in general was horrible, horrendous, no good, very bad. But you look at the one guy that was out there actually winning his battles consistently, and it's Lee Hunter. 28 pressures in 2024. That's the same number as Caleb Banks. It's the same number. And not to diminish anything Caleb Banks did. I think he finished the year at a world-class level. Like the last, let's say 4 games, Caleb Banks was playing like he's already in the NFL, okay? Lee Hunter never had that level of dominant performances back to back to back, right? But what Lee Hunter did do was pretty consistently generate pressure on the interior. And Lee Hunter, someone who just recently hit the transfer portal. That's why we didn't talk about him earlier in the process. But you've got a position right now on the defensive line where you've got Caleb Banks as your only proven guy that we know is coming back for 2025. Go get a guy that's already proven at the Power 4 level as well, because don't forget, like, you may feel however you feel about the Big 12, about any other conference that's not the SEC. But the big knock on UCF before they got to the Big 12 was that they're playing in the Group of 5. Now, playing in the Power 4. And Lee Hunter dominated this year. So he's dominated at the Power 4 level. And guess what? It doesn't even matter if that's where he dominated, because we have some criteria that we like to operate by and abide by when we talk about the transfer portal. And it is proven production at his previous spot, or a guy who's had, a year in college football and is now looking for a new spot to go to. Lee Hunter, not that part, but proven production at your previous location. Yeah, that's what Lee Hunter has. He is he's a damn good football player. I've said this for a while now. Big fan of his. I think that he can step in and contribute right away. And even if he doesn't start, like, you don't need to start in the SEC. As long as you look pretty damn good while you're playing, you've got some strong selling points, and you're going to put out some strong film to play at the NFL level. And that's what Lee can do. That's what Hunter can do. I don't know if I should call him Lee or Hunter. I like to call people by their last name, but also his first name is the shorter one. It's just interesting. But Lee Hunter's a damn good football player. And Florida Gators, if you're looking to just improve your roster, which again, the approach is just add players, figure it out later. Lee Hunter's a guy that you should add and figure it out later. We are going to stick to the trenches for the next segment. We're sliding over to the edge, though. But we'll talk about that with a player that I think the Florida Gators should also go after, and I think that they are interested in next on Locked On Gators. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, if you live play-by-play, and so much more on this same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch or make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thanks for being Locked On Gators, your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. And we're, like I said, we're sticking on the defensive line. We're sliding over to edge, though. And we're talking about a guy named Will Heldt. Okay? 6'6", 265-pound edge from Purdue. And look, I know that edge is a spot where I think a lot of Florida Gators fans feel pretty decent about. You've got youth, you've got quite a few youth or quite a few young players. You've got quite a few guys that have impressed in small margins. You've got LJ McCray coming up. But this is a spot that I said, even before Jack Pyburn entered the transfer portal, I was saying that the Florida Gators need to upgrade their edge room, right? That's a spot where, and if you disagree, you disagree. If you want to rely on the youth, you can rely on the youth. Absolutely. That's also an option. I don't like to rely on the youth when you've clearly got your point where this is your window. This is your window to go win a national championship, which sounds silly, right? Coming off a 7-5 season where we were talking about firing the head coach. Roster-wise, this is your window, the next 2 years. That's your national championship window. And in college football, windows very rarely last longer than that. This is it. Like, sure, you can add another QB that extends your window, but for now, 2 years is your window. Go get great football players. And the Florida Gators and the edge haven't had great players, right? Your best pass rusher was a defensive tackle. Your next best pass rusher was a big defensive end. You haven't had great production from the edge room. And yet, guys have impressed and guys have had pop plays, but the Florida Gators should be looking in the transfer portal. Again, even before Jack Pyburn announced he was entering the transfer portal, I was saying the Florida Gators need to go to the edge room. And if you disagree, you disagree. I don't like banking on youth in a championship window. And the expectation is you need to make the playoff in 2025. Go get Will Heldt. Will Heldt from Purdue, Power 4 football. Again, proven, productive player at his previous spot. He checks that window right there. You don't need to talk about the second one of the youth part. Proven, productive player. Will Heldt is that. He had 26 pressures in 2024, 6 sacks. So the 26 pressures would have been second on the team for the Florida Gators in 2024. Again, Caleb Banks had 28, same number as Lee Hunter, who we talked about last segment. And that would be tied for your leading pass rusher. Then it's Tyreek Sapp, 25. And Tyreek Sapp is that big end. So he's closer to a legit NFL strong side end, closer to a D tackle than the pure jack spot, the George Gums rotational piece, right? And George Gums, 22 pressures in 2024. So I think you go, hey, well, we can get a guy that has been doing it at the Power 4 level, could be a starter on this defense. And also, Florida this year was the defense. I know people have their complaints about it. If you're trying to stick with a pretty similar system, then you look at what the Florida Gators did on defense, and George Gums, TJ Searcy, and Jack Pyburn all played significant snaps as a stand-up edge rusher, right? Because Florida would have 3 down linemen, 2 stand-up edge rushers at times and go heavy, and they would have both of them out there. And so they're both rushing the passer. They're both dropping into coverage. Will Heldt is a guy that with 26 pressures would be second on your team and would be first by 4 in terms of your pressures off the edge, which again, Florida did not have their edge pressure very bad in 2024. That was the thing where you had great pressure from the interior with Caleb Banks. George Gums had some pop plays, but Jack Pyburn was absolutely horrendous as a pass rusher. TJ Searcy, not good either. Like TJ Searcy had 1 pressure per game. That's not a good number to have, okay? It's just not. There's guys that have 50-something pressures this season. So you weren't productive as a pass rusher. I understand also limited opportunities because of all of the rotations that Florida does and all the rotations that Florida had. But it's not like other programs are having guys rush the passer 500 times, and that's where they're getting pressure, right? Will Heldt was more productive on a per snap and per rush basis than any edge that Florida had. And he's also a very good run defender. That's the thing where we talk about guys like I know with Princely Umanmielen, who was a great pass rusher. The complaint was, oh, he's not good in run defense. With Jack Pyburn, great run defender. Complaint is he's not good as a pass rusher. The Florida Gators have not had people who are good at both. Will Heldt is someone that is good at both. Productive as a pass rusher. And here's the thing also, if you're talking about a conference that's not the SEC, because when you talk about, the Big 12, when you talk about a group of 5 team, an ACC team, you go, oh, yeah, well, they did it against not SEC talent. So you're looking for the step up. I believe the SEC is the best conference. I don't care to argue it. Big 10 is number 2, though. Will Heldt will be coming from the Big 10 with production against the pass, production against the run in what is the second conference. Like we talk, the Power 2 is the Big 10 and the SEC. It's the Power 2 there. So this is a guy that played really well at the other really good conference. And he's a hell of a run defender in a conference that you could argue is more built for the run game. He's played really well at that level. Okay? And also something with Will Heldt is that with Purdue's defense specifically, he's played quite a bit in coverage. He looks pretty comfortable. I don't think he looks great in coverage, but I don't think that these edge guys you really expect to be great in coverage. I think that, the surprise of them being in coverage is greater than the value of them actually playing in coverage, right? Like Jack Pyburn had a pick, but it was a tip drill where he just had to go chase the ball once it popped up in the air. Like, these guys aren't supposed to be out there making insane athletic plays in coverage. They're supposed to be just not getting cooked. And that's it. And so for the Florida Gators, you can add a guy in Will Heldt. And we've talked about a couple of edge guys that I want Florida to pursue that we haven't seen Florida pursue. And we don't know if they're going to. I know that they're at least interested in Will Heldt. I'll say that much. I don't know how interested, and I don't think that it would be a priority here. But again, at least interested, and that's something. So Will Heldt will be there. Power 4, proven edge rusher right there. You've got Ben Bell, we talked about the other day, one hell of an edge rusher. Guys that can rush the passer, proven. Guys that are tenacious run defenders. And guys that schematically have been dropping into coverage. And when they aren't dropping into coverage, they're productive pass rushers. That matters, right? Florida Gators can go get a guy like that in Will Heldt. And we're going to shift to the secondary for the remainder of the show, because there is a guy that I, again, believe Florida's at least interested in, and we will talk about him next on Locked On Gators. It's that time of year. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern time, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University SMU Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And can we take a second to talk about how pretty freaking cool it is that we are sponsored by the college football playoff? Hopefully next year when we're sponsored by the college football playoff again, we'll be talking about the Florida Gators playing in the college football playoff. That would just be, a fun thing to do. But again, it's pretty cool to be sponsored by the college football playoff. But the third player they were talking about today, not in the trenches, but is still defensive, is in the secondary this time. And it's Caleb Weaver out of Sam Houston State. This is one of those players who's proven production at his previous spot. You should have him for 1 year. Eligibility is just weird. That's why I say should, but if I'm not mistaken, he's got 1 year. And has been really freaking good. Okay. Sam Houston recently took the jump up to the FBS. They are now in Conference USA, if I'm not mistaken. And they had, one hell of a defense this year. Like, it was wild how good they were defensively, considering it's a team that just took the step up to the FBS. But yeah, they looked really freaking good this year. And one of their best players, their best player, I don't know why I said one of their best player on defense was Caleb Weaver, safety. And he's one of those guys where we've talked about with Florida specifically. I think that one thing they're looking for is versatility to replace the guy that they lost in Triquez Bridges, who is out of eligibility, so he's NFL bound. Started the season at safety, moved to corner when injuries piled up. And the plan initially when he got to Gainesville from Oregon was he's going to play safety, maybe a little bit of star. Never really played star, but did come to play box safety at certain points. Caleb Weaver, versatility is the name of the game for him. Okay? Just looking at his sheer snap count. Box safety, he's got 329 snaps this year. Free safety, he's got 338 snaps. And at slot corner, he's got 118 snaps this year. 2 snaps at corner, 16 snaps on the defensive line, just lined up on the edge. Like, he does everything for Sam Houston State. And now he is in the portal. The Florida Gators, at least moderate interest. And I think that he's like, we've looked at people that, or we know that Florida's looked at people that they want guys that could play star. They want guys that could play safety. You look at who they've been interested in at DB, and it's all guys that are safety / star, like Zechariah Poyser, looking at him to play the star spot. We know that Florida Gators fans are actively pushing with hashtag get Mose to the swamp. We know they're actively pushing for Mose Phillips there. And if we're talking about purely at safety, I think Caleb Weaver is one of the best options behind Mose Phillips. Mose Phillips would be option number one for me at safety, especially now that the safety from Purdue, Dylan, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, committed to Oregon. Now for me, I'm like, okay, it's Mose Phillips. Like he's got to be the top safety in the portal if you're asking me. He would be second if we're talking about behind Dylan Thieneman from Purdue. But I think that if you're looking at someone behind Mose Phillips or with Mose Phillips, it should be Caleb Weaver. Like I would take them both, honestly, because I think Mose Phillips would come in and compete for a starting role and probably win a starting role right away at safety. I think Caleb Weaver could come in and at the very least become a significant rotational piece at any spot on the interior secondary, so not corner, but at slot and both safety spots. I think he's got the versatility to play both. I think that the Sam Houston State defense allowed him to play both spots, very versatile. He's a guy with 5'11", 190, not a huge person, but he doesn't have some of the flaws that we've seen with other targets for the Florida Gators in the secondary. Like with DJ Douglas last year. He was one of the guys coming from a group of 5 conference that was looking at Florida, came to Florida. And the big flaw with him was he's got a really bad missed tackle rate. And if you go back to when he became a Florida Gator, we were talking in depth about him, one of my things was he's got a really bad missed tackle rate in the group of 5. And that percentage doesn't usually get better when you go up against SEC athletes, right? So I think that when you look at the secondary, one of the things that needs to be good, your tackle rate or your missed tackle rate, we'll say. Caleb Weaver, 9.8%. Okay? 9.8% is his missed tackle rate. That's really freaking good. Okay? Like you look at what DJ Douglas had at Tulane, and if I'm not mistaken, it was like 17% or something like that. 23% at Tulane, 26.5% the year prior. 17 was his best percentage. That's where I got 17 from. But you look at DJ Douglas and it's like, well, those numbers were really bad, and those numbers don't usually get better at the SEC level. By the way, his missed tackle percentage went from 23% in 2023 to 40% in 2024. So it didn't get better. It got a lot worse. And when we look at Mose Phillips III, like his missed tackle rate, pretty freaking good, right? It's 12% with a really bad week 1. He had 8 missed tackles last season. 3 of them came in week 1. That was it. After that, he never had a game like that again. So Mose Phillips, great safety. Caleb Weaver, great second option, one of the best options at safety behind Mose Phillips III. Go get Caleb Weaver. Like he's a guy that, again, played every single spot on that interior secondary. And we've seen injuries pile up. We know that the Florida Gators are looking for someone who could play significant snaps at star because Aaron Gates is expected to have a pretty significant knee injury at this point. Don't think he's going to miss the entirety of the season. Won't say that. But going to miss at least some time, probably a good chunk of the spring, if not all the spring. And let's just be completely honest. Like Keon Zipperer, unfortunately, announced his medical retirement yesterday. Or at least that's how I took it, that he was like, hey, my football career ended with a knee injury in 2023. We don't know how guys are going to bounce back from knee injuries. This is Aaron Gates' second pretty significant knee injury. You don't know how he's going to bounce back. Go get Caleb Weaver and have a guy that can step in and play significant snaps at star if you need it. Go get him. Like, you need to be prepared there. Again, this is your window. Right now, we are in the window where if you're going to win a national championship, you're there. We talk about DJ Lagway being generational. You know why players are called generational? Because they're once in a generation, right? They don't come around often. You've got the QB. Now you need to go get elite talent around him. And defensively, you need to do it. Offensively, you need to do it. But you need to go get elite talent that can come in and contribute. Go get proven talent that can come in and contribute. And Caleb Weaver is that. He is the proven talent that will come in and provide, or I don't know why I said provided, but would complement your recruiting out of high school defensively, which I think has been pretty good. Go add that and have closer to an elite defense that hopefully shows up week in, week out in 2025. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever listen to the podcast and on YouTube. We're going to get talking about the bowl game this Friday against Tulane. Gonna be a good one. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI, and I will see you all next time.